Welcome to Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way. Proactive is the Way is a podcast brought to you by two sisters who dove into the health and wellness industry. One plan and the other by faith. We have joined forces to bring to you authentic conversations about our personal experiences as it relates to managing our health, working within the industry, and taking our combined knowledge to share with you some pearls of wisdom that you can take with you to live the best version of you. Over the next year, we will host 2 episodes a month, and each month we will focus on a topic that is designed to increase an awareness of tools and resources to enhance an aspect of your mind, body, and spirit. Our topic this month will be all about letting our life speak. What should we consider to effectively listen to our voice of vocation? In the second episode of Designing Your Life, we highlighted a couple of exercises on how to identify flow and conducted a mind mapping exercise to narrow down activities that we tend to gravitate towards, and then use that information to devise our 5-year odyssey plan. This month, we're going to hone in on getting better at these exercises by diving deeper. We want to make sure that in order to do these exercises effectively, we fully understand how to let our life speak and listen for the voice of our vocation. To help us, in a couple of weeks, we will reflect on a book by our author for this month, Parker Palmer. Parker Palmer has written Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation. Today, Tiff and I, we're just going to discuss a little bit about what this all means to us. We'll give you our perspective, and then in a couple of weeks, we'll get to learn a little bit more about Parker Palmer and how he views letting our life speak. All right, Tiffany, so question for you. Have you ever encountered a period in your life when you realized that you were living someone else's life? Tell me your story.
Yeah, so wow. I I think that is my story. Like as I reflect back on my journey up until this point, I have experienced the times where I thought, where I know I'm most talented, or the areas of my life where I know I am most talented. I have experienced a lot more acknowledgement, a lot more praise, a lot more satisfaction, self-satisfaction, doing those things that I felt I was most talented in. So, for example, I loved playing basketball. I stayed playing basketball probably until 2014. I love to sing, I love to write, I love to create. And I was doing that for a very long time, but the pathway that I had been groomed on was one to attain a professional career, basically. Because as you know, creative artists or, athletes, well, athletes is more of a pathway, but creative artists don't really get to, that's not really considered like a profession.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like freelance. It's considered disorganized.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered misdirected. But I feel like those people who are able to stay the course with living their own life
Mm-hmm.
have more joy than people who are living someone else's idea for their life. And I know that like parents are here to guide, and I can't blame it on anyone because I believe like innately I already knew that even though I was academically talented, I also thought that as far as entertainment goes, had I put my energy and focus into entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
that I would have been as equally as successful.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And so you ended up making a decision to go a path that was more acceptable by your environment, by your family.
By the standard, right? By the expectation, by the society, what society standards are. Because when you do look at um basically the high percentage shot,
Mm-hmm.
the high percentage shot usually is obtaining an education and establishing, a professional. It's to attain education and getting a professional job, because you see it with athletes and people who are in entertainment. They are not just tunnel visioned or single focused.
Mm-hmm.
Once they have obtained, whatever it is their heart desires or whatever it is they are trying to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
they invest their money.
Mm-hmm.
They invest their money.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But that's
they
different though. They do that after, right? Because they've reached the maximum uh, age or their abilities, maximum within their abilities to continue in that area. So they decide, okay, so what other avenues I can pursue? And I like Grant Hill's book. He has a book, I can't recall the title, but he talks about having a parachute, making sure, I think it's called The Game or something like that, but where you have to have a parachute in order to fall back on, which is why he was really good in education, why he was really heavily focused in educate not only basketball, but also making sure that he got a good education. So
was it his autobiography?
it
It's
was
called Game.
Game, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, it
Or
was.
Change the Game.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that book propelled me to check out, what is my parachute, because I kept thinking to myself, that's great, because you should have something to fall back on, right? You should once you reach once you've reached the height of your career, you should be able and be willing to pursue other avenues, right? Be open and receptive. And we talked about that in our first episode of Designing Your Life, about how we don't just view, or I don't just view that we have one design, one destiny within our life. There could be an infinite, number of lives that we can pursue, right? And it will all be based on a point in time, right? Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. We tend to, just to go back to what you stated about yourself, as you were reflecting on living someone else's life. So right now, would you say that you're living someone else's life because you did not pursue because you did not pursue the entertainment industry, because you didn't pursue those things that really spoke to you?
I would say that in a sense, yes, because I was heavily influenced by and operating a lot of times out of fear of the what if.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if I don't make it? What if this never comes to fruition for me? Then what would I have to fall back on? I was intuitive like that. I did think like that. I feel like I was in a mix, like I'm young, free spirited. I look young, free spirited,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I was in my thoughts, I was older than what I look like, or what I perceived as.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I saw the bigger picture, like that's true. And it's kind of like with my child, how she wants to pursue dance and going after dance. And the reality of it is that people who are super talented, that's all they spend their time with, right? They're not they're not engaged with, you know, the
Right.
distractions being TikTok or on Facebook, and they're honing their talent
Mm-hmm.
constantly. And I remember from back in the day when Michael Jordan, when he first got into the league, multiple times people, they didn't really believe in him, like he was an underdog, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I remember a saying that he would say, similar to, or something like, or it had to do with, if he was shooting 100, if somebody else was shooting 100 shots, he was in the gym shooting 150.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was always, honing his talent, because he knew that was what was important for him to succeed. Now, could I have done that? I don't know necessarily that I was in the right environment for that, right? Because we grew up where we grew up, and that really wasn't available. It was available for a cost, but the investment that your parents may have been willing to make was shadowed by, people just out there making money
Mm-hmm.
off of, you wanting to enter the industry. So for example, what was it, like John Casablancas? We were all in different modeling things and entertainment things.
And the Miss Teen pageant, I think we were part of.
And they were there, for the experience, not
Mm-hmm.
really for training and making sure that if this was something you wanted to do for the long term,
Mm-hmm.
that you would have the tools to have done. So may not have been in the appropriate environment for that, because there really is no market for that where we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And still isn't.
I think there is a market. Are you talking about from an artistry perspective to pursue? I find Dayton, Dayton, to be heavy. How do I want to say? Very big with the arts. I just think the way
It evolved.
You think it evolved? No, because I even look at some of the things. I mean, they've been around for years, and I was like, wow. And I think it was my environment, our environment. We just grew up around parents so we have to put things into perspective, right? So our parents were orphans. They were always being shuttled from home to home, right? Being taken care of by other people. So they didn't really have a very big wealth of knowledge. Now, mommy, she got involved in, Delta Sigma Theta. She was aware of the opportunities that were out there, but I don't think she knew how to effectively impact us to go after our life, to go after the things that we desired, because she was really big on appearances, right? She was very big on keeping up with the Joneses and making sure that we were aligned with other children, because that's what she knew, right? She didn't have grooming. She didn't have that form of perspective from someone that guided her to allowing us to pursue, because we were all artists, all of us, Alex, you, me, we were all artists, but
Mhm.
and athletes. And it was interesting how we all three were artists and athletes, but how our parents really pushed us away from all of that. Remember when Alex, he was in the cotillion. Was it the cotillion? And it was like this big, or was it the botillion? One of those tillions. But it was like a big to do when he put in the book what he wanted to do for his career, and mommy was livid. She didn't know. Uh,
Right.
but he was like, I want to be a professional basketball player. And I won't forget that, because I was just like, dang, what's the big deal? If you want to be a professional basketball player, support him. Because he was really good in sports. He was, and it was interesting. She was just livid. So I just think it was a part of our environment. Uh,
Mhm.
because for me, I have never desired to live someone else's life. But
I
in
don't think anyone desires it. I think it just kind of,
well, for me, my path was like chosen for me. It was like, while I wasn't like living mommy or daddy's life, right? They were really big with regards to how they groomed us, and the paths that they preferred for us to take. And so while I wasn't living their life, I was always abiding by their will, what they deemed that was more favorable or acceptable within their eyes. And it really hurt when I was a kid, not now, because as we become an adult, we start to make choices, and we have to live with those choices. But they really could not envision me whatsoever living overseas and becoming a fashion designer. Like, that was just not an option, right?
Mhm.
And so, but while I wanted to share that piece, I've never desired. I've always kind of followed my own, once I figured out which direction I was going into, I kind of followed my own path within that. But it was always first chosen for me. Even human resources first chosen for me. But let me talk about being in HR, because it's kind of interesting. I'm not alone in this. There's been a lot of people who've had a similar life to me, to you. But I remember, as a human resource professional, I was always encountering people who chose their career for monetary reasons or because they had to. And I recall I developed and presented a course for our employees, and it was titled Managing My Career. And I remember at the end of the series, a man came up to me and he had shared with me that he really wanted to quit his job.
Mhm.
At this time, I believe he worked in customer service, and
Mhm.
while he enjoyed his role because he was very service oriented, it was not what he truly wanted to do. And he had shared that he wanted to be an airline steward. And when I had asked him, I was like, so what's preventing you? What's preventing you from pursuing, or preventing you from going down that path?
Mhm.
And he stated that he had a family, and he wasn't sure about if he would be able to take care of them financially, or if they would even support him. Now, when I think about that from your perspective, what do you think that his first move should have been?
Well, I definitely wouldn't have suggested, quitting the job because again, you have to have something to fall back on, but using the job and then on the side, I mean, if it means that much to you, then you're going to be working on both at the same time. You're going to be working to put yourself in a position to quit your job so that you can go after whatever it is you really want to go after. So, and you can do that. You can do both. I believe what we are conditioned to believe is that we only can do one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That if you have too many things going on that you're not going to be able to manage, we're just conditioned to doubt ourselves. We're conditioned to have we're conditioned not to be confident. And that all comes from control, right? Someone else wanting or someone else desiring to control another person's plight, another person's situation. So I think that that person, yeah, you could have that thought, but now that you already have the family, you cannot have that thought and negate your responsibilities. What is your true responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so,
well,
quit your job, but
yeah, I know. I agree. I think that from my perspective is definitely the second step in the process. But he never even engaged his family, right? Like for me, I was like, well, why don't we? And I think this is something that we should do in any situation that we are looking to embark upon. But step one, check the viability of it. Is this, yes, I have this desire, but is this feasible? And a lot of it may stem on the time frame, maybe it's feasible, but not feasible right now, right? So I felt like from my perspective, step one, why don't you check the viability? Talk to your family. You might be surprised. I think about when my ex-husband had lost his job, and he had lost his job, and I was like, and we had just bought a house. Not only did we just buy a house, I had moved from New York City and I was making $20,000 less. And we had 2 children, right? And I was like, oh my God, but when something is pushed on you, in his situation, he had a choice, but this was kind of pushed on me, right? You figure it out. We sat down. I was like, okay, what's the game plan? What are you going to do? Because you've got to do something. You cannot sit here and just live on unemployment. And so, he said, I'm going to go to school. Right. So I supported him in that. I said, okay, well, you're going to school. I'm making pocket change, supporting I supported everything, all of our finances. I managed our finances. I did everything while he pursued school. And he didn't get financial assistance, right? Because he was a foreigner. He was a foreigner, and he didn't have the abilities to tap into some of those financial opportunities. But within that, instead of him going straight to work, I had him sit down and I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what is it that you want to do, that you can see yourself doing. And let's now pursue that. And sometimes it's as simple as that. When we have the capabilities to sit down and just test the waters, have a conversation, open the forum, you'd be amazed at what comes out of that. And we were able to make it happen. We were able to make it work without it being stressful. And we still were taking trips, right? We were still taking family trips. Mm-hmm. We were still able to do that. So step one, check the viability. Step two, once you know that it is possible, I agree, Tiffany, don't give up your job. Don't quit, but try to find, unless you have the financial means to do so, right? So right. That comes in that step one of checking the viability, making sure you check your that it's okay with the family, that you're checking your finances and how you're going to continue going down this path, pursuing your vocation. So, what do you think? We keep talking about it, vocation. What do you think listening for the voice of your vocation means?
Listening for the voice of your vocation. First off, I have to tell you that everybody does not have that discernment. Everybody cannot hear what is being spoken to them. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact. Because and I don't know what barrier happens or what phenomena it is that people have it in different parts of their life. Like, for example, if I'm looking at entertainment, it's like, how did Beyonce know she was going to be Beyonce? Because she knew, right? She had to know, because look at how successful she is. She had to know. Mm-hmm. Or like Oprah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People like that have attained that much success. I look at like they had to know something was speaking to them and they stayed the course. So what is the voice, or listening to the voice? Mm-hmm. I say that this is a listening to the voice of your vocation. I use the words surrender and discipline and dedication, right? So one who listens to the voice of their vocation is willing to surrender, is willing to sacrifice all of those other things that interrupt or distract from what they have visualized as a route or journey to their success or their dreams and goals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I thought about this and I said internal reflection and self-assessment. Mm-hmm. Think about listening for the voice of vocation. What does that mean? It means that we have taken the time to really sit down and reflect internally, and whatever that means for you. But sitting down, whether it be meditate, I love, like, every morning you get up and you do your Calm app. But where you cause a stillness within your mind that allows you just to reflect on self. And then as you're reflecting on self, making sure you take the opportunity to do an assessment of yourself. There's nothing wrong with taking inventory, right? To say, okay, who am I, right? What do I like to do? What am I good at? And really doing that assessment, going through the steps that are necessary for you to find your strengths. Mm-hmm. And then not focus on developing your weaknesses per se, but really finding your strengths and determining how you can hone on your strengths or lean on your strengths or develop your strengths so that you can live your heart's desire. And because I truly believe, in order to know who or what we want to become, we must know who we are. And a great deal of this just truly requires us being still within our mind, allowing our mind to get quiet so that we can focus and hear our internal being, our internal self, leaning on our heart's desire. What does our heart desire? And based on those desires, really asking ourselves, do we possess the right skills? Do we possess the right competencies to live out our desires? And if we do not, what steps are we going to take to live our heart's greatest desires? Right? So it's inevitable that while pursuing our heart's greatest desires, there will be roadblocks. And how does one maintain focus to keep moving forward, muffling or drowning out the noise? What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
It probably was much easier when I was younger to do this, right? Because we don't have the distraction of technology like what we have now. But to drown out the noise. Again, you have to center yourself. You have to stay centered with something, whether it's God centered. You need to stay centered with something to develop that discipline to be able to cancel or drown out the noise and the distractions that would prevent you from obtaining your or optimizing your listening skills for your vocation or to obtain success, obtain dreams and goals, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
No.
kind of choppy, but
yeah, I think in this instance, anytime we run into a roadblock, we shouldn't give up. Anytime
I agree.
we run into a challenge, we need to just get refocused, and it's so easy to just call it a season. And I'll just share just a recent story, with our flow episode. I was like, are we ever going to get this done? Because last week, Tiffany came here to Ohio, and she was getting it done. She was getting it done. We had to clean out the house from the fire, etc. And so I just didn't feel like it was a good time to host a show. There was so much going on. As a matter of fact, it made me rethink about how we structured the show so we can allow ourselves a little bit more time, give ourselves so it's not overwhelming, right? So that it's not overwhelming while we're going through this transitional period. But in that, I kept saying, okay, we got to get refocused. We got to get refocused. Now Tiffany's back home, and she is hopefully, getting herself together. And we're going to get this show back on the road again, or back together again on our normal schedule. But when we run into a challenge, I think it's in that challenge when we truly develop. And we have to get up the next day and say, you know what? Each day, it's a new day. Let's start over. Let's do this again.
Right.
Set an agenda. Work towards fulfilling the commitments that we have made to ourselves. And I think I shared this before we started recording, Tiffany, but I shared that someone had once told me that when I am on the right path, it will be a constant struggle. And I thought to myself, now that is the most backwards statement to make to someone. However, I think I now know what he meant by that. And that message was designed for me. I think in reality, though, when you are on the right path, you will find the ability to focus. You will find the ability to find your flow. And no matter what people say or attempt to do to deter you, you will keep pushing through. No matter what happens within your life, even if you have to take a step back. And some people won't understand that. Some people will make accusations. They'll assume what you're going through versus ask the source. But that's not your concern. What do I say? Let me go ahead and put my cup up. That's
Right.
the problem, right? That's
right.
That's not your problem. That's their problem, right? And so we will have to continue to know how to listen to our heart, and we have to get very good at listening to the messages that come from the universe. And making sure that we leverage the gifts of discernment to keep moving forward and staying on the right path. Right. All right. Did you want to add anything else there? Because I wanted to jump in real quick, if you don't have anything else to add, about the first episode of That Good Life. You had talked about this idea that life should ensue you. And since we switched up the layout of our show, I wanted to permit you an opportunity if you wanted to take this time to clarify your thoughts around this topic.
You put me on the spot because I want to be ready for that.
Okay, we can hold it. We can still hold it. We'll hold it, and we'll continue. We'll continue that. I know you said you wanted to think about that, but
And when you are, since we're changing the platform and that sort of thing, with this being an opportunity of growth for me, just mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because that is the fruit that I am receiving from participating in the podcast, is to learn, to continuously learn, to evolve, grow myself. I want to give more to the listeners by being a little bit more prepared with the response. So let me think about that.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. Actually, this question I just threw at the end. It wasn't even originally a part of what I wanted to ask, but I remembered. I was like, oh, she wanted to share, some additional feedback. So when you're ready, get ready, because I'm going to ask you. I want you to, give us your take on that, because I really wanted to get your perspective on it. All right.
Okay.
All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. Of course, we don't want to leave you all hanging. As you know, we are lovers of music. We're going to keep this going. And to, of course, kick off our first episode for this particular series, I do have our music choice, unless Tiffany, you'd like to chime in. But I had, as I was writing this particular episode, I kept hearing in my head a song by Hillary Scott and the Scott family. And they are Christian singers, Christian singers. And it's a song called Thy Will. And during our last Flow episode, our first one within the series, we were talking about the will and the will of God. And this song kept, playing in my head because, as you know, Tiffany, I've been going through a period of enlightenment and understanding God and this notion of God and what it means. And this song jumped out to me because as I was reading the book, I'm not completely done with it yet, but I was reading the book. He talked about how we need to listen to the voice for our vocation. And he said how oftentimes we tend to say that it's coming from the unknown, right? And he talked a little bit about that, and it made me think about how a lot of us, especially those who are within the religious environment, we tend to say that our path in life is designed by someone else, right? And we on that. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really ineffective, because then if we're not successful, who's accountable for that? Right? And so this song came into my head about Thy Will. And in it, I'm just going to read a few of the lyrics. She talks about, I'm so confused. I know I heard you loud and clear. So I followed through, but somehow she ended up here. So she ended up still in a place of discontentment. And she talked about, I don't want to think, how she may never understand. Her heart is broken. She wanted to know if that was part of the plan. And she says, when I tried to pray, all I've got is hurt and these 4 words, thy will be done. And so all the time she's going through this and she's singing this song, thy will be done, thy will be done. And she's talking about how it doesn't feel good. I know you think of things I could never think about. So how this her God is greater than her and has her life all figured out for her.
Mhm.
And I just kept thinking to myself, well, what happens if you fail? What happens if in the end you don't achieve what you felt this source was telling you to achieve?
Mhm.
I kept thinking to myself, should we teach that? Should we teach that? And because I feel like if we do, we're teaching a whole generation to be unaccountable.
That's true.
Right. And so I love the song though. I truly love this song. I used to sing it every time right before church going. I used to actually scream this song because I really, I cried to it, etc. But as I shared before, I've been going through this period of enlightenment and the notion of God and how I view the notion of God has significantly developed. And I just want us to be mindful that when we talk about our heart's desires, and when we talk about the will, etc., we have to be mindful that a lot of this, we have to take an internal look inside. We have to take a look inside of ourselves and truly make sure we have an understanding before we have an expectation that that understanding should come from somewhere else, from the unknown, right? All right. So did you have any thing you wanted to add there?
No, that was powerful. Especially with the accountability. What stood out for me was accountability, because I think that in our society today, we lack a lot of this. We try to shift, we shift blame. We have a very distorted perspective of who is accountable, including when it applies to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or you hear that statement, the devil made me do it. That I swear as God is my witness, eat me up like no other. What's his name? He used to be a relationship guy, black guy, Jackson, or what is his name? The guy who was a relationship, always telling girls about, what to look out for in guys, etc. And he was married and he ended up cheating on his wife. And so
The guy that died?
No, not that one. It's another guy. I think his name is Jackson or Jack. I'll have it for you next time. But it was so funny because I was like, he got on Facebook and he was like, I'm so sorry, but the devil made me do it. Tiffany.
Oh yeah, him. Okay, I know exactly who you're talking about.
I couldn't clip that fast enough. I was like, dang it, it went away super quick. Because I was like, oh my God, I need to clip that. As soon as it said it, it disappeared because I was like, Facebook must have known what I was about to do. I was so livid. I said, no, he did not just get on there and say the devil made me do it. Accountability. All right. Okay, folks, well, join us in 2 weeks as we continue our conversations on letting our life speak as we review Parker Palmer's book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation. We look forward to you joining us. And in preparation for our discussions, we have included in the description where you can pick up a copy of the book. To access all replays or learn more about Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way, please visit www.kinkyknotscafe.com. Proactive is the way, my friends. Take good care.